All right, it is 5:04, so we're going to go ahead and start. Like we said, this is going to be recorded if you all are okay with it. So we will send this out and post it on our YouTube. So if someone is not able to make it, let them know that they can always go back and watch that. Okay, so today I'm super excited because this is my high school theater teacher, Miss Amy Miller. Um, Not going to mess up your last name today.
You can't think, I know you were in between the marriage and the switching of the names.
She's lovely in every single way and has done, she was an MT here at Ball State, which woot woot, we've got another, a good alum. And now she's teaching theater. So she's going to talk to us a little bit about how she got there and what that looks like. My high school is a pretty big high school, so there's a lot that goes with that as well, I'm sure. So take it away.
Yeah, well, I guess I'll just start with kind of how I got where I got to. Because one thing I can tell you guys is no matter what your major is or where you start or what your plans intend to be, it never goes as you plan, and you end up in places you didn't expect or jobs you didn't expect, whether they're within the field or not. And that's really kind of what brought me back home here to Southern Indiana and to New Albany. As Chelsea said, I started as with my degree, my BFA musical theater and dance at Ball State, and it was all gung ho actor type. Done that my whole life. I was born and bred in the system that I teach in now. Just graduated from our sister high school, and so after I got my degree, I literally graduated on a Saturday, packed my bags on Sunday, went to my first summer stock gig on Monday. Like drove my little red Grand Am and all my suitcases up 6 hours to Michigan, and took off with that. So I did the struggling actor thing for a few years. I just didn't last very long, as I like to say. But I did the New York thing, auditioning and pounding the pavement. Got my equity card and did regional work. And it's funny because I did a podcast earlier today with a local. Doctor who is interviewing community people, and he's kind of like, well, I mean, what all of a sudden made you like change course? And I said it's really weird because I was in New York, and I was getting on a train to go somewhere and getting my Metro card out and going through the subway, the style, and I saw a woman, and she had a baby strapped to her back, and one in her hand and a stroller in one hand, and she was like trying to get it all through into the subway, and I just had this. I was like, I can't ever do that. I'm nowhere near that, but I can't personally. I did love my time in the city. I think it taught me so much to get out, and to travel a little bit and meet new people and live other places. So I'm so glad I did it. I just kind of came to that realization point of like, well, how long do I do that until I figure out what I want to do when I grow up? And that literally brought me back here. I had no plan. I love kids. I did a lot of work with kids. I was pretty close to Michael Dane when he was in school. He really was like the first person I was in a show with at Ball State, and so even though I wasn't ever a theater ed major, he tried several times to get me to do both, but it was like literally impossible. Then I was like, Michael, I would have to stay like 6 years. I can't do that. Um, I always dabbled a little bit with him, and um kind of had the birdies in my ear saying, you're so good with kids, you're so good with other people on the other side too. And I'm like, no, that's you do that when you're 40 or something. I don't know. I just didn't ever envision that all of a sudden I was going to like pick up and get to the education part. So I came home without a plan. And I kind of did my last summer stock gig, during those months, and came home in August or September and just started working. You'll do a lot of unglamorous jobs. Again, it really doesn't matter whether you're trying to get your first teaching gig, or you're going to go to grad school, or you are a teacher, the sad reality of part of that is I have so many teacher friends who do work second jobs on the weekend to pay for their masters or, other things, because let's face it, any kind of education, it's not destitute, but it's, you're not walking into a 50 or $60,000 a year job when you start. And so, I was like working at the local winery. And I did so much retail. I never got into the waiting tables thing. I was like, that's the last thing I'm gonna do. And I temped a long time in New York too, working in offices. And so if you're really organized and professional and you can answer a phone, get into temping if you're in a city that has that, because it pays a lot better than your retail and all that other stuff. But so I did eventually follow the little birdie and enrolled back in school here at Indiana Southeast in New Albany, and just, okay, I'll do secondary education. Definitely want to work with the big kids. They do actually have some theater education at the IU Southeast location. So I was able to kind of go, wow, I have all these classes that are already there, and I really just need the pedagogy. And, they also made me pick another core content area. So I had to, and I think you guys have to do that too, right? You have to have an English, history, math, or something do you have to do any of that? Oh, you lucky ducks. I say that twofold because then one day you're going to be like, I'll take any teaching job. I should have done English, to get started. So once I started, okay, I'm going to do that. I'm going to, get the education degree. Let's just go back to school again. This job kind of landed in my lap. It opened up, which is rare around here because the directors that have been at these two high schools have been here. Chris Bundy and David Longest were here for like 20 years. Okay. And so, and someone else had taken the job. They actually retired 2 years before my start. And so they did have somebody else in the position, and she ended up leaving. And I like ran to my advisor. I said, I know I have nothing, but this is it. This is like, if I'm going to be a teacher, and I found my way, in our very Legally Blonde like theater moment. I was like, oh, it's meant to be. And she looked at me, she's like, no, you have no degree, you have no teaching license, you have nothing. So I was like squashed, and I'm like, dang it, I should have done this a long time ago. And then I'm kicking myself. And a mentor of mine said, it does not matter. Put your name in the ring. Put your name in for that interview. The principal is expecting you to. I've already called her. Okay. Another lesson in like the worst case scenario when you apply for jobs, whether they're teaching jobs, directing jobs. The worst thing they say is no. So don't not do it. I've been pretty good about taking those chances and having people who have looked at me and said, you have potential, or you have a good experience, and some of the red tape things can be over, just try, because what's the worst? They say no. So that's pretty much what got me in and landed me the job, is that I just went and I was like, I'll work really hard. And interviewing for the position was interesting. I had like 3 or 4 interviews, and I'm like, I'm just a theater teacher. Dang. So interviewing for teaching positions is also an interesting thing. I'm working on my plus 30, so now I've on my 4th round of school, my second master's, to get my administrator's license too. And so I've done a lot with hiring this last year. So interviewing for a position, even one that is a specialty subject, is an interesting process, and it can be really different in wherever you end up landing. So that brings me to, this is my 7th year at New Albany now. I finally am not new. Like, you hit year 5 and it's official. It's like an induction. You're like, I'm not a new teacher anymore. So that's kind of what brought me to New Albany. but I don't want to do all the talking. Chelsea knows me. I could sit here for like 3 hours and just wax nostalgia. So, um, if you guys have any questions about process or I mean, you fire away and I can start, hitting the hot spots. Do you guys have questions that you want to ask?
I know you mentioned that like when you applied for the job, you didn't have your license quite yet and you weren't done. So how did that like play out to where you actually got the job under those circumstances?
Sure. So some things to know about licensing. I'm not sure where everybody is in their school career right now. Probably some of you are getting ready to finish up this year or looking toward next year being your last year. Um, in the state of Indiana, so I can't speak to other states. Some of you that may take you to, depending on where you're from, or you head back to, especially in our area. I mean, we are 10 minutes from Louisville, so we have tons of teachers that commute from Indiana to Kentucky and Kentucky to Indiana. And luckily, we have a lot of reciprocal licensing in our two states, so that helps. But when I got this job, there are several what they consider permits. And this is just, I got a funny, oh, it's not really funny, it was stressful story about licensing once I get through the basics. So I was actually licensed under a permit, and it's called a career specialist permit. It does still exist in the state of Indiana. There are just very few of them because they are particularly for career type subject areas, business, theater, a lot of vocational and technical subjects. So it's not like a lot of people, and you guys will have a 4-year educational degree and go through a regular licensing procedure. But I went through a procedure, the career specialist, and what that required essentially was you still have to go pass your exams. You go take all the exams, but you have to have a degree in your subject area, and I want to say 5 or 6 thousand professional hours. So I had to go through and spend a lot of time going back to, I taught dance here and I guest directed a show here and I worked at this theater for this whole summer and had to get them to help me provide documentation to the state of Indiana showing that I had spent 5,000 hours in my subject area. Which, I had 3 or 4 years worth of stuff, so it wasn't too difficult to get to that number. So that is one option in the state of Indiana. If you come out with another license, you can, that was the way in. And that literally, like, I got hired in June and they were like, okay, so we think it's gonna come through. And I'm like, what do you mean you think? Well, it's going to come through, but if it doesn't, we're not sure what we're going to do, but we want you. We want you that much. And I'm like, okay, that's supposed to make me feel good, right? So, but the funny story is that, so here I get this license and I'm like, yeah, I have a license. It's great. Fast forward 6 or 7 years. I'm sitting in an admin class this semester about personnel, managing your school people and leading a team. And the very first class in January was about licensing and certified versus not certified. So when you get into a school, they may offer you a certified full-time contract. Sometimes, unfortunately, arts positions are like half-time. Like in our elementaries, music, art, and PE are called paraprofessionals. So they're hourly employees that don't have to be certified. So a lot depends on what school you're in, what district, what position. We're talking about all these licenses, and my professor's like, oh, Amy's on this special license. I'm like, well, yeah. And they start talking about professionalizing your license. So when you get, if you, in the state of Indiana, if you have a master's degree and at least 5 years of teaching, you can professionalize your license. And then you only have to renew every like 10 years or something. And the regular is 5. And my license was 2. So we start to strike up this conversation. And I'm like, yeah, Louis, I have to do mine every 2 years. It's crazy. Like, could I at least convert it to a 5-year? No, call my DOE lady. No big deal. Yeah, long story short, And my license was not professional. And I'm like, listen, I'm talking, to the literal Indiana Department of Education lady. I'm like, I have 2 master's degrees and you're telling in education, and you're telling me I don't really have a license. And they're like, well, it's not a professional one now. So I just recently, in the last like 6 to 8 weeks, had to go back, take another pedagogy exam, and provide all this documentation on all of it's a little cray cray. So good job. You're already a step ahead, because if you graduate and go take your exams and get your, baseline professional license in anything when you leave this school, you're there. And again, it's funny, like it's not like I would have changed my path then. I wouldn't have not gotten it just because I didn't really understand. It only took me 7 years. That it wasn't like a regular teaching license. But that's literally where your path takes you. It's crazy. But usually also on licenses in the state of Indiana, like if you're licensed, all teachers can teach some things. So we have a technical director position at our school that is a full-time certified teacher position as well. But he only does 2 or 3 tech classes in any given year, depending on numbers, etc. So like he has a teaching license, so he can also do technically by law, like any of our study halls, mentor study halls, like the CIE or basic skills. So again, depending on your situation, your school, your place, if you're not spoiled like me and get to teach a whole day of just your theater kids, you may be placed in remediation courses, study halls, or career information places, because they consider that all teachers should have enough pedagogy to pick up that content and lead kids in those classes. So like he does, I think 2 study halls, or credit recovery, and then two tech theater classes. So each state does do it differently. But in the state of Indiana too, if you are, I believe this is still true, things change so fast, you guys, in education all the time. When you like, if you go, I'm licensed in secondary, 5th through 12th English. Once you have one license, you could essentially, if you really wanted to, go study for any other exam to get another license. It's like if I wanted to pick up an English licensure because I was getting desperate or my job was getting eliminated, I have one license. I can go take that content exam to add something else. A lot of people do that with special ed. A lot of people do that with their administrative licenses and things like that as they go along the way. So there are ways to add things onto your license too. That's my long-winded version of my stressful story from this this semester.
You kind of talked about what the tech teacher what like classes they teach. Could you talk a little bit about what your class schedule looks like?
Yeah, sure. Again, we're pretty lucky in our district to, get to teach theater all day, add courses, take away courses. I mean, we're in a district that's very supportive of that. And most of the districts around here, we have about 3 or 4 big districts within our 3 or 4 counties, have some theater, and kind of, again, a lot of those teachers split their days, but depending on the year, my schedule changes back and forth, numbers. It's all kind of a game of what the kids sign up for, but I always teach 2 or 3 introduction to theater classes. In Indiana, the title is Introduction to Theater History. But our standards have changed, and that was 3 or 4 years ago. The state of Indiana revamped the dance, theater, and art standards and took what their little short list of Indiana things were and actually like moved them into the national standards. So our standards now look like the national standards, but they just basically went through and like changed some things the way they wanted them, or included some of the things that were in our Indiana state standards. So our standards are so large and broad. They literally, if you haven't seen them, Google it, go to the IDOE. It's a chart with 12 boxes in every row. kindergarten, first grade. So, I mean, a standard for every grade level. Plus, in high school, there's 2 or 3 levels. That's terrible. I should be able to tell you that. I know it's for sure proficient and advanced, but I think there's one more level. So then you've got proficient and advanced levels for your high school, and that's, in creativity, writing, cultural. There's like 7 or 6 categories, plus they all have substandards. So like you're never going to hit all those standards in one year. We generally pick like one big standard from each of the 6 or 7 for each course and try to hit that throughout the year. So our introduction to theater history is not just theater history. We choose not to do that in our district. Both my sister high school teacher and I. So I pretty much rotate when I'm in units between the history and the acting. And so they get a little bit of both, and a little bit of tech theater when we can work it in, depending. But another thing, again, I'm just very blessed because I know not all districts are like this. We do have common quarterly assessments, even in theater. We call them CFAs, common formative assessments, but they're really summative. It's like a long conversation. Anyhow, we have a quarterly, even in theater, intro to theater, that we have to give. It is attached to a pacing guide of standards for that quarter. So I can do on top of those standards in that pacing guide, obviously beyond it, but I have to hit what's there because that is what our district has said all kids in this class in this quarter should know and be able to do. So like the first and second quarter are they get like a little history, a little acting, elements of drama, and analysis. And those are the first 2 quarters. And the second or the third and fourth quarter actually goes to performance tasks. And it's like a scene, a monologue, etc. So my introduction to theater class really, it's truly supposed to be your high school elective. Like I have kids who just sign up because they need the arts credit. I have kids who have been doing shows since they were, 2 years old. We get everybody in there. So that's kind of your baseline course. And then I do an advanced theater and advanced acting. Sometimes it's split. It hasn't been split since I've had Chelsea. That then we switch over to primarily script analysis, scene study, character analysis, reading plays, directing, and get into kind of the stage acting, blocking pieces. And then I have a musical theater class, which is my baby. I'm sorry, I'm a musical junkie. For those of you who are not, it's like what's in the water here in Southern Indiana. Even though some of my most favorite experiences, and Chelsea was part of one of these, is my spring straight play. When we did A Piece of My Heart, was just one of my favorite directing experiences ever with those 6 ladies. We had some gentlemen too in Being Soldiers. If you don't know the play, it's about the women of the Vietnam War and the nurses and soldiers and whatever. But it's so funny because, like I said, total musical junkie. The class had never been taught at New Albany before I got this job 7 years ago. So they were like, oh yeah, by the way, there's musical theater now, which of course at the onset, I was like, yeah, and then I'm like, oh my God, there's nothing to start with. There's nothing. And here's the deal. Most of you are probably gonna like walk into a classroom, and I mean, they're gonna hand you standards and a pacing guide, maybe a quarterly, but you are in our subject areas, you are gonna have nothing, zero. I mean, my first year, I was like, I'm not a teacher. I don't know where to start. So musical theater, I usually have 3 levels in that class. Everybody has to take intro. That's a decision I actually got to make. Now, and I do have kids who don't. I'm not real harsh on that, but generally we want people to go through intro because we teach the basic vocabulary, and that vocabulary carries through your classes, your shows, and stays with you. But I I occasionally have upperclassmen that may dabble in extracurricular for a couple years and not be able to take class, and I'll go ahead and put them in a musical theater or advanced acting. Um, so musical theater usually has sophomores, juniors, and seniors in it, some of which take it all 3 years. And so, I differentiate levels with the materials we use depending on whether we're doing large group numbers, duets, small groups, we're doing acting, we're doing choreography projects. So that class, I really try to hit it all each year. This last year I had not done before. Our sister high school is really into this, but I have some thoughts on actually producing a show within the class. I did once on this island last fall in like August and September. Because my group had a lot of experience. Um, so my thoughts on producing shows within courses, I definitely think there's a place for it, but when somebody steps into the musical theater class, my goal is to teach that's kind of the next level, next set of vocabulary, next set of skills. And I don't think a teacher should just be using their time in class and doing a show. Like some schools, they just do a show because that's what they do all day, every day. I don't want to say they don't teach, but it's much easier to just go, oh, we can rehearse today than have to have a plan. I mean, let's face it. When you've got a show to do, you know what your plan is. I got to get through this show. And there's tons of teaching elements within that. But that's not something I would want to do every year personally. This group was right for that. They kind of already had the basics. Most of them had been with me since they were this big, and I kind of chose to shake it up. Now, I've also done that in my advanced acting class once. My first year, I produced Almost Maine within my class, but it wasn't until the end of the year. So it was kind of like we didn't really like eat time just doing a show a whole semester. We skill built until we got there and then applied it to the show. So I think you have to be careful because it's so easy to say, well, I'm just going to do a show in my class. And not all kids learn that way, because some kids are going to get a role and some kids are going to be in an ensemble or only have a line or only do chorus work. They're not getting the same experience that the kids who are singing the songs and doing the leading roles are getting. So I think it's just a delicate balance. And the big thing about teaching classes and formulating curriculum, and I kind of didn't figure this out till a couple of years ago. Like every year does not have to be the same, whether that's you're in class or you're out of class. Now, don't get me wrong, you have like a plan. You have units that you may switch in and out. And I never repeated the use of the same songs, musicals, plays, because again, sometimes you have kids that take multiple years. So you can't read the same play every first quarter every year, at least not in my world. You don't. But it took me a long time to figure out that, I had gotten some guidance in my first couple of years of kind of how to structure things and what to do. And about year 3 or 4, I was like, but that doesn't make sense. The kids don't even know what that means yet. Why am I doing that now? And like, I had to give myself the permission to change what I was doing, which is like wild because you get so busy and you're like, well, I do have to get through X, Y, and Z, and I do have to follow the guide, and there are things, but like especially this year in hybrid world, I have done nothing the same. I mean, I have all kinds of units in the same standards and concepts, but I had to give myself permission to go, that doesn't work anymore, or that doesn't work for these kids, and kind of switch it up, which is like crazy that, you start to go on autopilot a little and have to think about that. But in the last course I teach, I also do an educational theater apprenticeship, which has changed a lot since I've had Chelsea. It's a little more structured now. You figure things out along the way. I allow my upperclassmen to take, I think it's called Introduction to Educational Theater in the state of Indiana standards or class subjects. And they work alongside me in the intro classes. And I've also done it in my advanced acting too. I think, Chelsea, you did it in advanced acting. So I use my apprentices. They teach some for me. They help me work with groups. They formulate lessons, materials, And that's actually grown a whole lot in the last 2 or 3 years. And it's amazing how much an upperclassman can help you when you have 30 freshmen in a room and you're like, okay, you go there, and and three of them are yelling in the back, and the door's open, and four are in the hallway, and you're like, okay, you take this half and I'll take this half. So I have those 5 to 6 courses depending on the year. Um, Many moons ago, in my first couple years, we were an IB school. You might encounter the International Baccalaureate Diploma, and I had to do IB theater one year, which is a lot of research based practice and practical hands-on. And unfortunately, we're no longer IB, but we are AP TIP now. More things you're going to learn about getting into all these schools is that there are like 8,000 kinds of diplomas that kids can get now. It was not that difficult when I was in school. It was like either you're an honors kid or you're a core 40 kid and like graduate, yay. Um, and now there's also a special AP concentration. So we do have AP music theory and AP, art, but there are no AP theater classes, which is really kind of sad. Because I'd be totally on that train, but so it just depends. I was throwing around last year before the pandemic. I was just thinking I have these students in class, but it didn't exactly work out how I thought. An actual special education, like specific course. And then we kind of went the no, we shouldn't take them away from the normal group route. And maybe it's an inclusive show. And we were like all, like firing up for that, and the pandemic hit. But I do have special education students that come into my intro and advanced acting classes. And that's a whole nother like topic, y'all. Special education isn't just your moderate and severe kids. It's any kid with an IEP, which it's like a quarter of our population at New Albany High School. However, we do have our mild, moderate, intense programs. Those students that do stay more isolated during the day and then go out for specials. So then you have those kids joining your class as well, and you have to figure out how to make accommodations to work them in to the group and classes. So we ended up merging them into the intro classes to make sure that they had those opportunities, which has been some of the most fun stuff I've done. Especially when I have apprentices, it's great because then I have extra hands and they're all working together. So then you kind of have that element. And then my tech teacher does an intro to tech and an advanced tech. And depending on the year, we'll do stage management during the day too, if we have the kids who want to do it. The last couple years, we haven't had the interest, so he works stage management into the other courses. But in the state of Indiana, the only other courses that are theater based, you'll see we do it kind of wonky at New Albany and Floyd Central. There are a bunch of dance courses. I shouldn't say a bunch, 4 or 5. We actually use those for musical theater class so that students can get credit every single semester they take class. So first year's like musical theater and dance choreography because they're semester long classes. So for us, intro is a year. Advanced acting and advanced theater are a year, but all the musical courses are semesters. So we actually pair them up so that if you're a kid taking 3 years, you get credit all 3 years for doing that class. So there's a bunch of dance titles. So we use those within musical theater, and we teach dance concepts and choreography within our class. But some schools truly use those as dance class. If you go across the river to our youth performing arts school in Louisville, they actually have like a dance concentration, and they're using them as dance classes. So again, with the dance standards, I actually sat on the committee a few years ago to revise those and went up to the DOE several times and worked on those standards. It's like lovely because our standards are so broad. Sometimes that can be a little intimidating because you're like, wow, 12 things could fit in this category. What do I do? But it gives us the freedom to give the kids in our building what they want out of a course and get them credit, because sometimes if they only offer one title for theater and they want to take theater 4 years, they get credit the first time and then they're sitting in class not getting any credit, which isn't fair. Not fair. You're sitting there doing the work, and it's different every year. Um, so again, long-winded answer to all of it's pretty amazing actually. At least Indiana has multiple courses, procedures, and standards for the arts. And really that came a long way about 4 years ago when we redid all of those standards. Any other questions? I mean, I can just make things up. Yeah.
So do you still perform? And if not, do you miss that aspect of theater, or do you feel like teaching fulfills that part?
Yeah, well, the answer is yes, I do, which is the crazy part. Sometimes I'm not sure how performing artists and theater educators and anyone in our collaborative society, they're amazing multitaskers. My first couple of years, no. Depending again on what kind of program you come into, just being a first year teacher is enough. I'm telling you, it's like cray cray. And then if you have the extracurricular element attached, then you've got shows and seasons and kids and all of that. So for my first couple of years, no, I did not. But my mentor, Chris Bundy, who did the sister school program for all the years that I was there, called up about 5 of his former students and said, "Hey, y'all, I have this idea." I said, "Oh, no." He said, "I think I want to start a theater company. And you're the people I need to do it." And I'm like, "Oh my God, can I, like, it's so hard to say no." I'm a yes man. So many of us in education are, because we want to do what's right for kids in our school and work on the team and be part of the building. Like my first year, I did everything. I chaperoned prom. I went to graduation. I mean, every building committee, whatever it was, and I still do that. And I act like it's not the same. But so he called and said, "We're going to start a theater company." We're like, "Okay, how are we going to do that?" He said, "Well, I have the 501(c) that was handed down to me from someone who tried this and failed. So we just need a place." And our first year, we didn't have a place. So we did the shows in the high schools, studio theaters. We both have really nice classroom spaces and that are like, Floyd's is like 100-seat, like little mini theater. It's crazy. Ours is more like a black box, and we seat about 50 to 60 chairs in a performance in there. So we did a couple shows. We did a play and a musical. I performed in the musical that year as Pump Boys and Dinettes, if you've ever heard of the show. God, love it. Love that show. I did it twice, y'all. We brought it back for our 5-year anniversary because it was nostalgia. That's what we started with. And then at the end of the year, he's like, "We need a building. We need a space." And just long story short, a year later, we were painting walls and building stages in a building here in downtown New Albany. Is the old historic building here in our downtown on Main Street. And we put a like 90 to 100 seat small, it's definitely not a black box, it's like a little mini stage, wings, tiny wings and curtains and everything. And we decked this whole big building out and was like, "Let's try it." And we have over 300 season subscribers now in the last, 4 or 5 years. Of course, until the pandemic hit when we shut down for a while. So I missed it enough to go back. And it didn't take long. We're just here. You will find, don't ever let anyone tell you, you're going to get those people who look and go, "Oh, educators are the people who didn't make it or doing because they can't." Don't ever let anybody tell you that. I got into education because I found that was like my calling. I knew that's where I needed to be. And somehow I have still found a way to get back on stage. I found a way to choreograph and direct independently, not only at TheaterWorks, where I literally helped establish a theater company, but at a couple other local places. And you'll know when yes and no to those projects. you do need it. I needed it, at least. It did fulfill a different need because kids are wonderful. Actually, I love, you ask Chelsea, I do a show every year that has 100,000 little children in it. I'm like, bring on all the littles, bring on all the middles with my big kids. And absolutely, I'm like, can we do 6 shows this year? Can we do 5 shows this year? Like, I will go whole hog for it. But you do get to a point where you need to be fulfilled in some way, whether it's being in a show or just making the time to go see theater or direct or do something. And even in the worst of times, I have kind of figured out where the balance is. A couple years ago, my mom got very sick with cancer and had a bad surgery and almost died. She was in the hospital for 3 or 4 months. And I was booked to do a show, to do Spelling Bee with TheaterWorks. And, I had just married my husband literally in September. She had all this happen in December. So we are in the thick of like, oh my God, I just got married and houses and family. And I looked at him because I couldn't believe I was torn. I mean, you think your mom, and I'm only child, like that's kind of, it's me and my husband and my husband's family, helping with my mom and dad. And I looked at my husband and I'm like, I know you were going to say I'm crazy, but I think I need to do this. I need to figure out how to do this because I am so overwhelmed with life problems that like, I know I'm not sure you understand, but this is an escape. And I am so blessed because my husband does understand, and he is not a theater person. He does not want to be on stage, but he loves musicals. So find someone who loves musicals as much as you. But he did. And again, even in that kind of personal stuff, you find the people who understand your passion and what you need and when you need it and when you don't. And even in the thick of that, I figured out how to do it. I was also in a situation where, the director was one of our board members. And I said, I really need this. I don't want to bow out. But, if my mom needs me, I have to. Can I have an understudy? We don't normally do that at our theater just because it's so small. And, it's a semi-professional community space. And he said, yeah, let's do it. And so I had an understudy that worked with me. And what I did was I gave her a couple of the performances. We generally run like Wednesday through Sunday for 2 weeks at our theater, sometimes double Saturdays and Sundays. So I let her do the weeknight shows, and she did the Wednesdays and Thursdays for me so I could do it on the weekends. And she's a great friend of mine. So it's amazing how your opportunities, will lead you back. It won't take long. And even now I'm getting ready to have my first baby in June, and they're like, so next year. And I'm like, infant. They're like, but in the spring, would you feel like? I don't know. So, wherever you land, you just have to form that community. And it was easier for me because I'm from here and I already had some of those connections. But if you put yourself out there and find a place, that doesn't mean that you can't create the opportunity for yourself too. Because like I said, around here, we're inundated with it, whether it's community school or our professional series in Louisville. We are spoiled. We have a lot of opportunities, but we created one that we decided how to run and how to do and became kind of our family space. So, our music director, her kids are always sitting in rehearsals with us and on stage with us. And, one's got a baby strapped to their back or whatever. And you find that community that allows you to fulfill that need because I just feel full-heartedly that reminding yourself what it's like to be the actor on stage. And, I haven't always played a lead role. Like, we did Big River and I was like the lady with the corn cob and the blacked out tooth, in the ensemble. But I was like, I need to do a show. Like, I just need to move, I need to sing. You find your networks and it does fulfill, and it makes me a better teacher because I learn from the people I'm working with. And I learn from adult actors as much as I do my high school actors. So if you can figure out the balance and you need to fulfill that, go with the flow, because you know your mind and your body will tell you if you can't. And there are times that they tell me I can't too. One of them is like right now, getting ready to. We never do a show this late in the year. Usually our big musical is over in March, but with COVID, they asked us to move back into April, and it's like the weirdest thing doing a big show this late in the year. Usually I'm like winding down. When we go to spring break, I'm like, freedom. And we don't open our spring musical until the third week of April, or second week of April this year. So change, change, change. Education always brings change. Anything else? I'm an open book. Ask Chelsea. I will be honest.
If no one else has anything, I will ask something else. I wasn't there actually for this, so I get to learn too. We just met with Tracy Gate. I don't know how to say her last name. Yes,
Okay.
and she pilots a bunch of shows, and you just got to pilot your first show. So I'm curious what that experience was like.
Yeah, so you know, then you're like, oh my gosh, I have classes and a program, and there's all these things like the Thespian Society and the State Thespian Society and regionals and International Thespian Festival and all those things. So I'm not gonna lie, I had been poking the bear for several years trying to get a pilot. Our sister high school had gotten several pilots in my first years as director. And you know, I'd been out to the Thespian Festival every year that I was at New Albany taking a group, even if, you know, usually I would only have maybe 10 kids that would want to go. And we would haul up on a bus, usually with our other high school, if they weren't taking a show out there. And so I had met all the MTI people multiple times, and it's just a networking game, y'all. I mean, seriously. I went out there and dropped every name in my book. I met every rep I could. You know, I'm like, John, hey, David Longest, you know that you worked with all these times. I'm name dropping. I'm trying everything I can. And you know, just finally I got in the mix because especially MTI really likes to use the same people. They get schools that they're comfortable with, that they know are easy to work with, and will take pretty much whatever they've got available. And so you know, I'm doing the follow up after that year's festival. I said, John, I'm really interested. I have a great group of kids. They can do anything. I'm not picky. Like, what is it that you want to get out there? They had mentioned a few things. Crit, my lighting and sound designer, who, have you guys met him yet, or is he coming up?
He's coming up.
Oh, just wait. He can talk as much as me. We're the dream team, we like to call ourselves. He's just my great friend, and he's just a lighting, just we're like on the same wavelength, and it just, we don't even have to say things sometimes. I'm like, you know, over there with the kind of like this from that show he did, but in this shape, and he's like, doink, bam. You know, he's amazing. Just wait till you meet him. He's wonderful. He he had heard that like they were trying to get Elf out to the schools, and gosh, I can't remember something else. So I'm even dropping. I'm like, oh, you know, Crit said you had mentioned maybe Elf. Awesome. Great. I'll do it. Whatever you want. And so this did not go down the way I planned when it started. He's like, actually, Amy, we'd love to work with you again. I think, you know, it's nice to see you again and talking. And then I'm like, yes, I'm in. And he goes, but actually, MTI's decided to fast track Elf. They're not even gonna pilot it. And I'm like, oh darn. Well, you know, whatever it is, like I'm game. You know, we're in a great place, great kids. He's like, well, actually, God, I couldn't believe. I just like I was sidetracked. He's like, well, actually, we have this little show called In Transit. It's a 90-minute a cappella musical. How about it? And so I'm looking at this email, and I know what In Transit is, okay? It's 90 minutes, all a cappella music, set in New York City, primarily on a subway train, and lots of curse words and crazy sensitive topic matters, and I'm like, Oh, um, wow. I'm in Southern Indiana. I mean, I was like, okay, I'm gonna go watch it. I knew there was like a, black market copy on YouTube or something. And so I'm like, okay, I need to I need to refresh. Because I try to keep up as much as I can with what's coming out and going. But when you're a teacher, you're also trying to do that with education. So it's like, there's so much going on. I watch it again. I'm like, there's no way. I mean, let's be honest. Like Chelsea had just left, and there's like one huge a cappella number at the beginning of Godspell, and we were all like, I said, how are the kids gonna do 90 like a show where like someone has to beatbox every number to keep like that is how it is written, and I was like, I have to delicately do this. I cannot lose. I was like, what do I do? You don't want to say no. I've been trying for like 4 or 5 years to get in. Oh my gosh, John, thanks so much. I'm just gonna be honest. We are in Southern Indiana. I am a little concerned about a few things. I just told him honestly. I said, but if this is it, if you do have nothing else, and this is truly what you want to push out, I will give it a try. Well, then he came back and he said, no, it's not the only thing. It's just a little something unique. And we haven't been able to get anybody to pick it up. I think he was testing me, but I must have responded okay. So then he came back with, well, we're doing more school editions. So beautiful thing you'll encounter. Don't be afraid of a school or student edition, whatever they call them. At the beginning of my career, I was like, oh, those are just watered down versions of musicals, and my kids are professionals and they're awesome, and we're not going to do that. Um, Student and school editions are turning into, hey, you have a really good, talented boy singer who's a baritone, but like, can't sing go the distance high. Hey, here's an optional key. You have some really great, talented actors, diversity. You want to do West Side Story, but maybe the strongest dancers. Here's a cut option in the dance so that you can like do a little bit of it, but not feel like, oh my gosh, my kids are going to struggle. So school editions have changed a lot in the last 10 years. So I really encourage you, if you're doing that extracurricular element, read them, peruse them first. I was poking the bear at the Chicago student edition this year. When we went into this school year, we were told no musical in the fall. And so, long story short, push, shove. Okay, you can do something small, distance, whatever. And I was like thinking real hard about it. And so, like, again, they didn't necessarily change Chicago. They didn't cut the storylines. Yes, she still sleeps with him at the beginning. Yes, she still kills him. But like, okay, here's an optional sentence. Like, this is the one without the curse word, or there's one scene you can cut, or so a lot of the school editions, particularly Theater Rights Worldwide, it's like, here's all the options you can do, and you can choose what might roll over with your community or what might not. Versus like we're doing Grease right now, and there's a school edition of that, but it's like Rizzo is like cut. Oh, no teen pregnancy. And I was like, it's the best song of the show. I'm not cutting that. So that's also been interesting. But so getting back to the student edition was the same kind of thing. They are looking at, where are the keys for the kids? Are the keys of the songs working? The sad part for me is that I have a lot of dancers who take class and are interested, and we emphasize everybody is a mover, everyone can learn. But actually the school edition was again a case in which they made some of the dance numbers shorter. Okay, that's fine though. That was our job. The other interesting thing was, we tend to put up massive sets, and this school edition was designed to be very quick, with little transitions, and very much designed for bringing in a piece of furniture, flying in a drop, so that it could be simplified. And so I called one day and I said, I got this big, beautiful house, this big, beautiful study unit, and there's no, it's like 14 seconds long, and it's going from the study to like ascot. I mean, that's like a massive scene change. And you'll learn as you become directors, as one, you want the scene changes to be as short as possible, don't get me wrong. He said, I was like, but I like, we just need it twice. And she said, well, you can, but we're going to encourage you to stick with the script. That's why we wrote it that way. We don't want the audience sitting in the dark. We want schools to be able to just change in and out and go to, and I'm like, okay. And by God, by that process, we did not double that scene change. But it's those kinds of things, is that you call and say, this is working or this isn't. Hey, do I have the liberty to do this? Because normally you don't. You get a script and you got to do what's in the script. Casting, numbers of kids, choreography. So you get to play a little more, and it was fun. I'd do it again in a heartbeat. And of course, we got that production adjudicated, and that was accepted to the Thespian Festival when it became virtual. So they still got to see a taped version of it. But everything's kind of been on hold this year, and I knew I couldn't really do a pilot with our expectations in our district, which are at least doing shows. Most of the state is not doing anything. So at least we've gotten to do some stuff, but the pilot process it's fun, but expectations are high. And so about 2 weeks before, they called and said that the show writers that edited the show were going to come see it. So obviously they're sending their people too. They're not just send me a copy like, yay, you did it. They want pictures, they want updates. They're constantly sending you new scripts and insert this line here. Oh, we forgot the last school that did it. So like, we were number 3 of 3. 3 schools did this one. And like, one was in the spring, one was a summer institute thing, and then us in the fall. Oh, we forgot that we changed that in, July. Here's a new copy of the script. And you're like, oh, hey, Tech Week's on Monday, so it keeps you on your toes. It was awesome though. I'm like, give me something new. So, but it's all about who you know, and it's all about networking. And, as you get your feet on the ground, if you can get yourself out to the Thespian Festival, even if you don't take kids and you can at least go, every educator needs to be out there to meet people, see what the licensing companies are promoting, and see what other schools are doing. Because it's amazing. Some years I go out there and I'm like, our shows are twice as good as all these shows. And some years I go out there and I'm like, oh, praise you. Oh my God, I'm not doing anything right. It's just amazing what you see get picked up and what directors are doing. Some years the sets are huge and massive and expensive. And some years it's all about like, doing nothing. And you're like, what is it this year? So you start to learn, but you got to get your foot in the door. And so then John called me back last year. We did that, gosh, like COVID pandemic time has made my whole brain go. I guess that was fall of 19, in spring of 20. Hey, Amy, how do you feel about the prom? And I'm like, ooh, what? He's like, I think we're going to acquire the prom, and we want to think about how it's going to go over with high schools. And incidentally, you're in Indiana. How do you think that's gonna go over? So I don't know if you've seen how many people know the prom musical, or if you watched the movie version of it. I've been told, I didn't get to see it on stage. I've been told it's actually pretty darn close to the stage version, minus a few liberties. But it's about the lesbian couple going to prom in Indiana. And I just looked at him and I said, well, I need to see the script. I'm not going to give you an opinion without looking at it. I said, but I'm not afraid to do it, but I don't know, okay, you go out to Denver School of the Arts. They did Spring Awakening. Yeah, they're going to do that. California, they're going to do that. New York, they're going to do that. I said, my little sect of the world, I don't know how many people would be afraid. So it's funny because then they want your opinion. They want to say, what's your community like? And you'll find out really fast how your community responds to what you're doing in school with your curriculum and out of school. And I've been very fortunate that we have a pretty supportive community. And I, knock on wood, I haven't gotten any trouble yet, but we're doing Greece, so that might, might put me over the edge. Oh, anything else? I don't know how much time you guys want to spend. I'm sure you probably have lives also outside of our little Zoom tonight.
All right. I guess if no one has anything else, thank you so much for joining us, Amy.
So
We
welcome.
appreciate it so much. You're so wonderful.
Anytime. And you guys can feel free. Chelsea has my email and stuff. Please feel free to like holler if you have questions about whether it's the extracurricular or education side, because in school I'm a department chair and I've got my getting ready to get my admin license. It's because I'm a school junkie. I just can't stop going back to school. So, I'm happy anytime if you want to chat, call, text, or whatever, or if you're getting to that end of the year exam time or whatever, please don't hesitate. Because again, networking is great. It could lead you to a job and, you never know. So just like I called Chelsea, I was like, hey, I'm going to have a baby. Do you want to be my sub? It's like, I need somebody to come be my person for a while. And she's like, well, I'm not graduated yet. I was like, dang it. So, please feel free, Chelsea, to give everybody my email address. And anytime you have questions, and I'm sure Crit will do the same. He'll have lots of good stories about our adventures at New Albany High School. All right. Hey, you're welcome, guys, in the chat. I'm just pulling it up. Yes, Tucker. I've worked with Tucker at Hazelwood. I just put me in whatever theater will take me, and I and I will do a show. Tucker, thank goodness we did Addams Family, because as soon as we did it in the fall, then I did it in the spring with my kids. So, oh, all right, awesome, guys. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it getting to talk to you guys.
Yeah, thank you, Amy.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Bye.
Bye.